Hello, everyone. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle, along with Juan Williams, Eric Bowling, Dana Perino, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. The threat of a terror attack here at home is on a lot of Americans' minds this Thanksgiving, with a new warning by the government to be on alert for a Paris-style attack. Is it safe to travel? Does the administration know of a credible threat? You'll hear from the president directly a little later this hour. But first, Chicago is bracing for another night of protests following the release of a video that shows the shooting of a black teen by a white police officer last year. That officer has been charged with first-degree murder. Things got very tense last night in the city.
Right, let them look into the eyes of our black youth. You are part and parcel, sir. You are the front lines in the perpetuation of everything that's wrong in our community.
You'll see more of that in a moment, but first let's check in with Fox's Mike Tobin for the very latest there today. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Kimberly. We're at the corner of Jackson and State in Chicago's Loop. There was supposed to be a demonstration here. Mostly what we've seen manifest are a lot of TV cameras and, of course, the bike cops who are doing so much of the crowd control. Everyone anticipating nightfall. As we saw things last night, there was a little bit of pushing and shoving between mostly the bike cops and the demonstrators out there. But it would be inaccurate to call the demonstrations violent from last night. It would also be inaccurate to call these demonstrations big in light of what we saw in Ferguson and Baltimore. But there is plenty of outrage here in the city of Chicago now that the reality of that dash cam video has been witnessed, and plenty of outrage, particularly from the city's Black Caucus, because it took the state's attorney more than a year to bring charges. Also with the police superintendent, the Black Caucus is calling for the ouster of Superintendent Gary McCarthy. Beyond that, we did have some demonstrators march up into City Hall. It was a small group of them who went to the mayor's office demanding a meeting with the mayor. If they don't get that meeting, they say they're going to go to the heart of the city's shopping district, an area known as the Magnificent Mile or Michigan Avenue, and they say they're going to disrupt Black Friday shopping. Beyond that, Father Flager at St. Sabina Church, who works in so much of the troubled areas, he says he's going to organize a sit-in on Michigan Avenue in light of all that has happened. Beyond that, everyone is looking to nightfall, anticipating what we will see later tonight on the streets of Chicago. Kimberly?
All right, thanks, Mike. And although the demonstrations last night were mostly peaceful, some police officers in Chicago had to deal with encounters from angry protesters like this one.
That's right, let them look into the eyes of our black youth. That they are part and parcel of oppressing and a continued systemic racism that has permeated this country for 400 years. You are part and parcel, sir. You are the front lines in the perpetuation of everything that's wrong in our community. You, sir.
All right, if that bothered you at home, you're not the only one. That happened while Megyn Kelly was live on the air and one of her guests defended the hecklers. Well, we have the
You think that's fine? You have no problem with this?
This is his First Amendment right. The biggest problem here is...
It's not a question of what his constitutional rights are. It's a question of what's appropriate.
And I see nothing wrong with this. These young people are angry because their lives are literally in question on the streets of Chicago.
Okay, so that was pretty incredible to watch last night. I saw when it happened. Now, violence has spiked in Chicago in the past year. We've talked a lot about it on this show. Many of the incidents were black-on-black crimes. So why isn't there a similar type of outrage from the protesters over that? Fair question. Fox News asked one of them. Here was his answer.
The fact I don't feel safe around police is disturbing. Crime is going to happen. Wherever you go, crime happens. And the people that are here to serve and protect are part of that problem. So it becomes a problem when you can't even call 911 and feel like you're safe to protect you from people that are committing crimes.
All right, I want to take it around the table for first to address the guy, the protester was there staring down the cop. Greg, I mean, you had a pretty serious reaction to that.
No, I don't think it was that big of a deal. I really don't. I mean, we have staring fights when we were in high school. The thing that was bothering me, what was being said while he was doing it, which is whenever you hear the word systemic, that it's a systemic problem, that person never, ever has statistics to back up the systemic nature that he discussed. And what this is about, really, it's about statistics and it's about justice. If you look at the statistics, they tell you that these horrible incidents are very rare, a tiny percentage of all police action. You have 1.1 million police officers, 317 million people. These incidents have declined dramatically over decades. That's the statistic part. The justice part reveals that when it happens, when an act like this happens, justice is served. And in this case, justice is being served. The policeman is being charged with murder. So my point is, I think that the protesters are getting exactly what they wanted, and they should be pleased. I don't know what else they want. I mean, what else could be done other than this officer get charged with murder? Should we shut down the whole police? That would be like shutting down all of immigration because of one terror attack.
But the problem is they protest regardless of what the outcome is, whether justice is served or not.
Well, that's their
what
right,
they
though.
do.
That is their
but
right.
I'm saying when you say what else do they want, it doesn't matter. They're going to do it regardless.
Well, you could argue that the protests in this case might have helped.
But the protests were subsequent to the charging and the indictment. So how could it have helped?
Overall, protests might have helped.
So the Ferguson one, I don't know. I mean, I think the tape, the evidence speaks for itself. And what else are you going to do when you have a guy empty?
It was peaceful.
16, rounds from like one clip, one in the chamber, 15 in the clip, boom, into somebody. I think that's pretty compelling evidence right there when you shoot someone from behind.
I agree.
Bowling.
All right, I watched the video. This was awful, what that cop did, and I'm a huge defender of law enforcement. If you watch and I don't know if we play the video, some people are playing it, some aren't. There was no threat to his life. So I'm glad that they charged him with first-degree murder. KG, you can tell us whether or not there has to be premeditation with that or not. I doubt there's premeditation, but it certainly was a bad reaction.
It can be formed in an instant.
Let's talk a little bit about last night and the protest. I agree with Greg. I mean, it looked pretty darn orderly. I mean, I was watching both our network and other networks, and we were doing these aerial shots over, and it looked like they were standing in a group. There wasn't a lot of violence. I don't like to see the guy getting in the cop's face. Nonetheless, he has a right to do that. It wasn't violent, and I'm kind of okay with it. My concern is that as we cover it more, are we creating more tension? Are we putting more pressure in the pressure cooker because they're getting on TV? Now they're calling for some stepped-up protest on Black Friday. I hope it doesn't happen. You got an indictment. You got a first-degree murder indictment. You got the cop is likely going to get in a lot of trouble. Who knows where it's going to go. And the system worked. I don't love Rahm Emanuel, but he handled it well. He didn't release that video prior to the indictment. I think the time
because it would have been very hurtful to him.
So
somebody
it seems
like,
but here it is now. The ball is in your court, protesters. You got what you want. You did a peaceful protest. Don't ruin it now by doing something stupid on Black Friday.
All right. Well, you can count on that happening, to be perfectly honest. And with respect to the police officer, what did he ever do to deserve that level of disrespect and provocation? I mean, some of these people, it's like, why don't you grow up? You ask for respect and you show none in return. It's one thing to protest peacefully, but you don't need to escalate the situation by creating a confrontation like that. It's irresponsible. I think it does jeopardize public safety. There's a right and wrong way, to do things, and that just shows. I think it highlights, just with emphasis, just the total lack of respect. And who's that guy going to call when something happens in his neighborhood and needs a police officer? It's just like,
I guess you cannot like what the guy did, but the guy can do it.
I'm telling you from a public safety perspective, because I spent over a decade doing this, that it's not something that's going to help. It escalates violence. It creates more angst and disruption in the community. There's just no point for him singling out that officer, like that guy's Attila the Hun or the devil. I didn't say that he couldn't do it. I said that I don't think it furthers their objectives.
You know why he did it, though?
Well, it's my opinion. I'm telling you. I don't care if you think it matters.
But can we all agree on why he did it? Because there was a camera on him.
Right, exactly.
If there wasn't a camera right in their face, there was no reason for him to do that.
But this is my point. It was all for provocation. It's all part of a show in the theatrics, and I just think
but then it's a camera's
lacks like sincerity about the whole situation. He's just a cheap threat and cheap trick he's pulling there to just create some publicity for himself. It's like,
and we ran it. It worked. Congratulations, protester.
Well, it was live
It's been
TV.
on our TV for hours.
It was live TV last night. It was on Megyn Kelly. So I hope there's some sugar in your unicorn. Oof, you're so cranky today. Ugh, unpleasant.
Has
Dana.
nothing to do.
Well, I was curious about Juan's perspective, but on one of the things that was being yelled at the officer, I mean, the officers are now having to pay for this individual's horrible act, and I hope that justice is served, but I understand, Juan, one of their frustrations on the protesters' part is that justice, well, they might get justice, but it's been so delayed, and that bothered them, I think. But also when he says to the officer that you are the front lines in the perpetuation of everything that's wrong in our community. I think that's the part that, to me, I hope that they don't actually get
It's
any
grad
traction
school
on that.
speak.
No, but you know what I think? This is so interesting to me because you guys are surprisingly sensitive on this issue. I'm really taken aback. I mean, nobody
how
can.
nice of you, Juan.
No, because look, what has happened.
That's not condescending at all.
wasn't
How condescending. It is. It's just that.
No.
But that's just
look, I
perfect.
think
It's
there's
just
a
in
lot
keeping
of-
with President Obama's attitude that everybody else is ignorant and
you
dumb.
walked
and
into
if they
that one.
show
I can't
any
even
kind
say
of,
anything. I'm just saying there's a
forget
lot
it.
of reflexive behavior on the right that says, we always want to stand by the police. And in this instance, I just think that what I saw in the video is just horrific.
Yeah.
And I heard that around this table. That's all I was trying to say. Nobody said anything more than that. The second thing to say here is when they're talking about that systemic stuff, Dana, I'm not a systemic. I'm a personal responsibility guy in my life. And, to me, if you're talking about it, even in terms of, let's say, how the police relate to poor black people in poor neighborhoods and the necessity, again, I don't think that is systemic so much as specific. And the larger argument, again, coming back to how the right response to this typically is to start talking about, well, look at how many black-on-black crimes and murders there are, and you're worried about the few, as Greg was pointing out, that are done with police interaction. They're relatively few compared. I, by the way, again think that's a real outrage. Why is the NAACP not marching in the streets of Chicago about black-on-black murder? But I don't want that argument to take away from people's legitimate concern when police are using too much power, too much force, too much guns to try to control poor black communities.
It's actually a weird thing. It's in these worlds of outrage. There's a mirror. It's a mirror to terrorism. When we say the number of terrorists is small, we demand total vetting of those coming into the country. When we say the number of cop incidents are small, the group that is outraged demands total vetting and resources on reform. It's almost exactly the mirror argument, and we should acknowledge that.
Well, when they talk about when you're saying the systemic thing, it just makes me crazy.
I know,
because as a black person in my neighborhood, I want cops.
Yeah.
I don't want abusive cops. Let's be clear, but I want cops.
Gang violence is systemic. Where there are gangs, there is violence.
Right.
This is not systemic. This is rare, which makes it outrageous.
Out there are respectful and do an incredible job for us under very difficult circumstances, despite the attitude of punk, boom, bees like that. Stay with us because up next, Karl Rove is here. We've got some 2016 developments to ask him about, and he's got something to tell us about, so stay with us.